one of the questions I most often get from students is whether or not it's acceptable for them to use a particular source in their essay. Here's a quick discussion of the relative ranking of a few different kinds of sources. At the bottom, the least reputable kind of source, and the one that I least recommend that you use, is what I sometimes call random online content. And by this, what I mean is material that you find when you start entering topics into a search engine. Sometimes you'll get good materials, but often you'll find a lot of websites of dubious quality. Sometimes I like to refer to this as random online garbage. These websites might involve top 10 lists, or other sort of clickbaity titles and topics. It might be unclear who the author is, might be unclear when the content was written. Just in general, it is not something you can rely upon. It's possible that the things covered in the text will be useful and correct. It's also possible that it would be straight up false or deeply misleading. We just don't really know where we stand with a lot of this online content unless it's coming from some other more reputable institution or platform. The next level up is what I would call blog posts and other web content from nominal experts in a given field. One of the great things about social media and Web 2.0 is the ability of people all across the world to easily share material online. This includes ordinary people, but it also includes a lot of experts who have extremely interesting and important things to say. Sometimes these experts will use platforms like Twitter or Facebook or a blog as an outlet for them to test out new ideas, for them to lay out a lot of the really cutting-edge work that they're doing. Sometimes you can find some really fascinating things there. Sometimes, however, these same experts might post things that are not fully thought out. It might be just almost an exhalation or even a rant. The issue with this sort of content is that we don't really know the state of mind of the people who are writing it. It's not really vetted in any way. It's like unfiltered, almost like a hot mic. So we shouldn't really rely on this material either. It might be interesting, it might be something that we look to for inspiration, a prompt for our own ideas, or a gateway that leads us to something else, but it's not something that we should truly depend upon. The next level up in terms of reputability is what I would call works, articles from reputable journalistic outlets and popular publications. You can think about articles from some of the more prestigious newspapers like the New York Times, the Atlantic, or the Wall Street Journal, or in Canada, something like the Globe and Mail. Now, these works are not always the most accurate. It tends frequently to be second-hand knowledge, as opposed to research from primary sources. But this work is good in that it's often quite well written. So, although we shouldn't necessarily rely upon this as our principal source of evidence, we could use this as a way to find useful quotes or other prompts. If nothing else, we should be able to find at least some sense of what a general consensus is, or where the public conversation is going within this sort of resource. So this is something that you should feel free to use, although don't base too much of your core argument on some of the materials that are found in works of journalism or popular publications. The next level up is where we start to find materials that we can use as more reliable pieces of evidence. This next level is where we would find things like works from trade publications or institutional publications. By this I mean texts that are written by societies of professionals for the professionals in that group, or texts, white papers that are written by businesses, NGOs, governmental organizations, which provide some sort of argument or research or overview of a given topic. These things can be really good because their central intention is to keep experts in the field up to date on what the latest understanding of a topic is. They might be reports from a conference or something like that to let us know what's being discussed at the highest levels. This might not be the truly cutting-edge research. It might not be as thoroughly vetted as some other materials, but it tends to be quite reputable, and it usually involves a lot of other well-researched sources as well. The top level is where we can really start to rely quite heavily upon the sources that we're using, and this is when we're using peer-reviewed articles and scholarly books. Peer review is sort of like the gold standard for academic research. This is a process by which top-tier experts in the field review the work of other experts in the field. Peer review isn't perfect. A lot of bad material slips through. Sometimes studies are revised or found later to be incorrect. Sometimes good work can't actually make it through peer review. But it's the closest we have to a rigorous process for separating the high-end research from the lower-grade stuff, the stuff that can't be verified. In general, with this sort of research, you want to use the most recent articles possible. More recent tends to be better. Sometimes the work is almost timeless, but something from the 1930s is generally not going to be seen as reputable as something from the 2010s. So try to look at what's been published most recently on a topic and weigh that a little more heavily when you're trying to evaluate research. You should also try to look at the materials that are published in the most reputable, impactful journals in a given field. So for example, in the sciences, the two leading journals are Nature and Science. Anything that's published there is really what's considered to be at the highest level of the field. There's still lots of good research that's published in lower level journals, but if you really want to understand the state of the field in a particular topic, look at the highest impact journals and see what they're saying. So, the three kinds of sources that I recommend that you use in your research essays are peer-reviewed articles and scholarly books, trade publications and institutional publications, and reputable works of journalism and popular publications. Anything lower than that, I would not recommend incorporating into your final essay. You might use it as inspiration, you might use it as a link to get you to something else, but you should not treat it as foundational evidence for whatever argument you're trying to make. In order to find these high-quality pieces of research, the best place to go is Mohawk's library. Check out the institutional databases, see the archives that are available to you, and use that. In addition, you should try to use Google Scholar. Many of the things that you find on Google Scholar will be paywalled, but quite a bit of it is actually available for free. If nothing else, you can almost always read the abstracts, and this can sometimes help you down the right pathway. If at any time you have some questions about whether or not your source is good, useful, appropriate to your research topic, make sure that you get in touch with your professor and ask what they think about it. Bring the evidence to them and see if, in their view, it's something that's worth incorporating.